and it is my pleasure now to introduce our final keynote speaker. Again, I always say the same thing, I think, because I can't believe it's already the end of day 2. We have a bit of a surprise for you as well, because we will have a sparkling wine reception or a champagne reception after this presentation as well. So make sure to stick around for another 20 minutes and don't just run home. I know the Frankfurt game is on very soon as well. So please stick around for another 15 minutes afterwards and just exchange some more thoughts. But now it's my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Premier of the Yukon, Mr. Ranj Pillai. Really looking forward to his remarks. I had a chance of chatting with him earlier today. I've mentioned it before, but I think the Yukon is one of my favorite mining jurisdictions. It does have its challenges, of course. Infrastructure is one, remoteness, permitting to a degree as well. And just having the Honorable Premier here in Frankfurt just shows how much the territory actually cares about mining, is putting into it as well. And I think the mining community is giving a lot back. You've heard about the charities, the engagements. So I think it's a really great two-way street, and I'd love to hear more from you. Thank you so much for joining us in Frankfurt. We really, really appreciate it. Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kai, for the introduction. And again, thank you for the invite. It's been a long time coming. I know that we've been trying to make time to come to this very important conference, and it hasn't. It's met all expectations. What a great, well-organized opportunity to tell our story. I absolutely we're very grateful to be here and to represent the Yukon in this international stage to talk about mining in our territory. I am absolutely honored as well to be joining Yukon companies Victoria Gold, Banyan Gold as well, Snowline and Fireweed Metals at this event, all the way from Northern Canada. And absolutely, look, our community is completely in sync and behind mining. And I want to thank John and Tara that are here for all they do for our community. It is incredible. What they give back, and Brandon's here as well, and his contributions to the communities that he works in as well. To set the scene, I'll give you the Yukon context. I'd like to start with a high-level overview of our unique region. So, the Yukon's truly a special place. It is a vast territory covering 482,000 kilometers and is situated east of Alaska between British Columbia and the Arctic Ocean. We represent just under 5% of Canada's total landmass. So for a comparative perspective, the Yukon's close in size to Germany and Austria combined. So despite our northern location, the Yukon is well connected with daily jet service to Canadian cities and seamless interline connections to major international markets. We continue to be the only northern territory in Canada with a centralized, connected network of maintained highways, which has linked us to Alaska, the Northwest Territories, British Columbia, Alberta, as well as to the seaports in Skagway and Haines, Alaska, and Stewart, British Columbia. Our year-round highway system has more than 4,800 kilometers of all-weather roads, including the Alaska Highway, that extends from British Columbia through the Yukon and across the international border, and the Dempster Highway, Canada's only road to the Arctic. The Yukon's population has been steadily increasing every year, so it's about an increase of about almost 25% increase since 2013. But think about that landmass. We are home to only 45,000 people and have the highest population growth, though, in the country. The Yukon's robust local economy and a growing mining sector have been key contributors to recent population gains, along with opportunities for an exceptional lifestyle and an absolutely beautiful natural landscape. And I think we shared some pictures with you here today just to tease you a bit. In addition to our economic mainstays of mining and tourism, we also have an investment ecosystem that supports economic growth and diversification in our entrepreneurial sector and our flourishing media and creative industries. Along with economic growth of 10% in 2020, 8.4% in 2021, so you can think about what was happening at that point in time in the world, and a further 5.8% in 2022. So we have among the lowest national unemployment rates and are welcoming economic migrants from across Canada and around the world. On top of that, the Yukon has a skilled labor force with the highest proportion of degree holders per capita in the country. In 2020, we also became the first and so far only northern Canadian jurisdiction to be home to a university, Yukon University. And prior to their elevation in 2020, Yukon University has had a long history as a post-secondary institution, inviting students from across the world to study. The Yukon has 14 unique First Nations that are all integral part of our culture, governance, and development. Reconciliation and strengthening government-to-government relations with Yukon First Nations is a cornerstone commitment of our territorial government. Alongside Yukon First Nation governments, First Nation development corporations, which is their business arms, and our industry partners, the government of Yukon has worked to make the Yukon investment ready and well prepared to address new challenges and opportunities by investing in our people, infrastructure, and environment. So I hope I've provided everyone a bit of contextual understanding of our territory. Now I'll delve into the segment I think that you're all here for, which is mining. So from the very early days of the Klondike gold rush, the Yukon's mining industry has played a crucial part in providing investment and employment opportunities while also developing our economic potential in the north. So it's our 125th anniversary this year as a territory. But between 1896 and 1899, an estimated 100,000 prospectors migrated to the Klondike region in search of gold after a local discovery was made at Bonanza Creek, an area where actually Tara spent all her childhood, right there. Long history of gold mining in her family. The discovery of the gold in Bonanza set off a frenzy that would capture people's imaginations from all walks of life from all over the world. News of the discovery spread like wildfire, and within a year, the remote wilderness of the Klondike in northern Yukon was swarmed by tens of thousands of eager prospectors. Gold mining in the Yukon today, while still exciting, is characterized by modern techniques and innovation, as we just saw in the presentations earlier. But while the methods and technologies have evolved significantly since the gold rush, the pursuit of this precious metal remains a central part of Yukon's economic landscape. Their management practices demonstrate excellence in environmental stewardship, outstanding social responsibility, leadership, and innovation. And almost everybody that's here today are at this conference, John's team, Tara's team, as well as the Snowline team, all just won awards in the last week, or will be getting national awards in early 2024 at some of our biggest conferences. The Yukon's expansive geology continues to reveal a diverse range of significant deposits, both gold and otherwise, with large areas still waiting to be explored. The Yukon is home to over 3,000 identified mineral occurrences, including 25 of the 31 minerals defined as critical by the Government of Canada. Some of these commodities include copper, cobalt, tungsten, platinum, palladium, zinc, nickel, all of which the Yukon hosts a significant supply. Of the 31 critical minerals on Canada's list, only 6, aluminum, cesium, graphite, helium, potash, and scandium, have not yet been documented in the Yukon, although prospective geology for 4 of these commodities does occur in the territory. Mining plays a central role in the transition to a green economy, and critical minerals are vital to low carbon technologies like batteries, wind turbines, solar panels, and electric vehicles, which we all know. Our significant deposits make us well positioned to support the implementation of Canada's critical mineral strategy and contribute to the transition towards a cleaner future. So with this demand for critical minerals on the rise, the importance of establishing a robust interjurisdictional collaboration to ensure the security of supply chains will continue to grow. To this end, our government remains committed to collaboration with our partners, stakeholders, and First Nation governments to promote the territory's global potential in mining exploration and development. And as I mentioned earlier, Yukon First Nations play a very significant role in the governance and development of our territory. So coordination between the Yukon government and Indigenous governments, stakeholders, communities, and development corporations has advanced many already significant infrastructure initiatives that will allow for new opportunities in exploration and mine development, supporting shared economic stability. So to support this in collaboration with First Nations partners and governments in developing new minerals legislation is one of our key pieces of work. Our goal is to create new legislation that supports a modern, sustainable mining industry with less red tape. It is crucial that mining projects establish comprehensive engagement while impacted First Nations communities and other government bodies. What I always say to our mining companies that come, spend as much time with your First Nation partners as you do with your bankers, and things will go smooth. Mineral exploration has long been a key component in the Yukon's economic success, and the skilled services of First Nation businesses continue to contribute hugely to this sector. One of our companies, Quantity Drilling, which a lot of the companies here use, and started in the Yukon, now has, I think, 11 offices worldwide, and have become globally recognized as a drilling company, but started in the Yukon. It's a First Nations-owned company. Mining initiatives hold the promise of delivering enduring economic advantages to our First Nations communities in the form of employment opportunities, royalties, infrastructure, and infrastructure development. One question I've been asked a lot about is around energy. So we are also looking at partnerships as well with our First Nation development corporations when it comes to energy. So by working together, we're transitioning towards a more sustainable economy. We have numerous renewable energy projects across the Yukon, and all of them are being led by First Nation governments and owned by First Nation governments. We help de-risk those projects by offsetting some of the capital costs and purchasing the energy to our grid. But that's led to about 90% of our energy production being clean energy. And our goal is to have 93% renewable by 2030. And that's still with a 40% growth over the next 10 years in our demands. In light of this, our long-term energy requirements are a priority for our government, and we continue to explore a series of solutions, and one focus being the electrical grid connection between British Columbia and the Yukon. So we have submitted applications to the Canadian government and are now working with the British Columbia BC government to look at our first phase of the development of that grid connection. The Yukon is globally recognized as a globally recognized mining jurisdiction with strong environmental, social, and governance standards. As I mentioned, we continue to work alongside partners to develop new legislation and infrastructure, and we maintain close coordination with the Government of Canada and Yukon First Nation governments. This collaborative work includes, again, creating a modernized mineral framework for the Yukon rooted in sustainability and responsible practices. So this regulatory transparency, along with the development of new infrastructure, is a key part of what makes the Yukon a prime jurisdiction for investment. In the past 24 months, Yukon has seen over $240 million in equity financing, with portions of these investments coming from 3 new seniors, so B2 Gold, Hecla, Rio Tinto, and Mitsubishi, who have all taken positions via strategic investments or M&As within our territory. And this year to date, the Yukon has seen just over $100 million in financing. And so when you think about British Columbia as a very significant destination, we're just behind British Columbia. They're at about 149 million, and we're at about 104 million. And we're outperforming areas like Alaska significantly. This year, we're also continuing to work to help stimulate new discoveries through what we call the Yukon Mineral Exploration Program. So we spend a little over about $1.4 million, and it's between 40 and 50 different exploration projects that are supported in that work. And these projects, again, will spend about $5 million in exploration this year. So our team at the Department of Economic Development, which are here with me today, make sure that we tell our story, and that we're out at events like this, great events. Again, thank you, Kai. In September also, I'll share with you, I had a chance to meet with, we were abroad in both Japan and India, but we met with large Japanese corporations as well that are showing very significant interest. So industry organizations and government industries there to promote economic opportunities in the Yukon, and including investment in critical minerals. So meetings with Mitsubishi Metals, DOA Metals, Japan Organization of Metals and Energy Security, JOGMET, and Japan Overseas Infrastructure Investment Corporation join, and with the mines minister in India as well. So it's always interesting when you travel that far around the world and they know intimately the projects in the Yukon because they're actually world-class deposits. So we're actively dedicating resources to infrastructure, which is a fundamental factor in promoting sustainable mineral development. And when compared to other northern jurisdictions, our infrastructure is notably developed and helping to mitigate what is consistently recognized as a challenge for projects across the north. In our efforts to improve further, we are closely collaborating with industry stakeholders, the federal government, and engaging, again, in government-to-government discussions. Just in close on the infrastructure program, we, through our Gateway program, which is a road building program. We've got approximately $500 million. That's between public and private partnership. So we continue to deploy funds. The majority of those funds are still in place to be deployed. And the budget for the spring of 24 will have more of those funds going out. And additionally, we're working in Skagway, Alaska, which is just across the mountains from Whitehorse in the Yukon. Actually, at 5:30 Yukon time, Pacific, just an hour off of Pacific Standard Time on Thursday night, we passed a budget for a supplementary budget, and we dedicated just over $21 million towards redevelopment of a port in Skagway, Alaska, which gives companies like Fireweed, who's here, will give them access to tidewater for the next 50 years. So important work as well. And when you look at some of the modern mining companies, big majors, what they want to see is they also want to see what your digital backbone is. So we're also just about to complete a project we've been working on for the last number of years. It's a 777-kilometer fiber line, very complex. It goes over 1,100 water crossings, and there was directional drilling under the Mackenzie Delta just next to the Arctic Ocean. That will be completed in 2024. It's about a $100 million project that we partner with Government of Canada on. Our airport, which is an airport, depending on the season, I could fly here to Frankfurt, but we're putting about $250 million into our airport. That work is continuing. We have one major bridge project on the Alaska Highway, which connects us to southern Canada. That project is well underway. It's about $160 to $170 million being spent there. So when you take into consideration the fact that we have a population of approximately 45,000 people, this is a real significant support and bet on the mining sector, on the people of the Yukon, and also it's important for us. I think we all think now about Arctic security and where things are in the world. So we also see that all of these investments that support the sector also support Canada and Arctic security. So with that, I want to thank everyone for supporting our Yukon companies. And Kyle, I'll hand it back if you have any, let me answer some questions or whatever folks would like.
Fantastic. Well, let's... No, wonderful. It's truly a two-way street, and the effort you're putting in, of course, and investing in the infrastructure, I think, is key. You're allowed to open the floor for questions.
Sure.
So if anybody has any questions, otherwise we can also lead a discussion a bit, sort of what we did earlier today. Yeah. Do we have any questions in the audience for the Honorable Premier? We don't, but I have. Okay. Which is good.
Good. Any tough questions? I like tough questions.
No, fantastic. You brought up talking with companies like a Mitsubishi or JOGMEC. And,
yeah.
Like, what is their number one concern? What are they looking for when they come to the government and say, okay, we're interested in projects X, Y, Z? What kind of reassurances are they looking for?
I think with Mitsubishi, because it's an investment in the Western Copper Project, which is a very significant project. World-class deposit. It's ports, power, people is what I've heard. That's the conversation at the table, whether it's with Mitsubishi or it's with Rio Tinto. I think what we're seeing is on power, look, we have to undertake a really significant project. We looked at it in 2017. There was sort of, in the history of the Yukon, there was this idea of maybe building large power projects in the Yukon and selling the power to BC, to British Columbia. And then what we saw was British Columbia do a major investment into something called Site C, which is a very significant hydro project. And they were worried that they wouldn't have market for all of that power. And I was energy minister at the time, and we started to look at the pricing. They thought they were going to be selling their power on the open market, which is about half of what we were spending per kilowatt on some of our thermal production. So we started to have discussions, and we did some studies. At that point, British Columbia they weren't interested, really. They had a lot of things domestically to focus on. So we opened that, when I took on this position, we reopened that discussion, and it's been great. I met with the Premier of British Columbia 3 weeks ago. We'll be giving a mandate to both of our ministers of energy to work on this. And Canada right now is allocating about $1.5 billion across all provinces and territories for critical minerals. So we have put our ask in, if you'd say, that our number one priority is this grid connection. And we think it's smart for Canada. Canada, as a federal government, has to think about securing the Arctic. I mean, this is a conversation, of course, that happens here as well. And we think that a grid connection is a smart bet. So that's something I think that Mitsubishi and folks like Rio Tinto, if they continue down this path with Western Copper, see as a good investment. It'll actually be probably a major decision point for them. The port piece we're working on right now, it's a complex project because we're a small subnational government building a port in another country, but we're working through that, and we've dedicated significant funds to it. And when it comes to people, look, we have I wanted to highlight to you, we have this really educated population, the most degree holders per capita in the country. But we also have the lowest unemployment rate, and we've had the lowest unemployment rate for about a half a decade. So I want to be very open with you, and I want to be transparent. It's a challenge to make sure you have a workforce. I think that's something that is been significant in the country for a long time. The mining sector. My grandfather was a miner in Canada, in Ontario, and Quebec, and my uncles were miners, family members were miners, and there was a real migratory workforce. We still see that, but there's a lot of different options, and you have to work hard. John's done an incredible job. We were so happy when Victoria Gold opened. There was pride in the fact that it was the campaign was "Please come home," and so you have all these folks coming back to the Yukon and having a really great paying jobs and a good quality of life. And as well, one thing that John's humble and not sharing, but First Nations communities, the difference is, First Nations communities, like many communities across the world, it's important to have elders around children and uncles and aunts. And, one of the stories that John shared with me, and if John, if you don't mind, I'll share, is one of his staff came back to work for him. And what ended up happening was all of a sudden their children now can stay with grandma or their aunt. And so they're learning their traditional languages again because they're in that, family ecosystem, which they don't get a chance if they're in, Alberta or British Columbia. They might be able to find great professional careers, but they won't have that cultural component. So we're also, we know that mining is a sector that in our communities, you can live there, you can still live a land-based traditional life and still make, $100,000 a year or whatever the job may be. So I think we're seeing more folks pivot towards that opportunity. So those are the things they talk to us about.
Fantastic. Do we have any questions? Let me just look around, because I have another one just to follow up on infrastructure as well. The Canal Road and the Casino Road as well are extremely important, especially fireweed and snowline here as well.
Yeah.
But what's the status of those projects?
Well, we just finished the first phase of the road into Casino, and now we're going through a negotiation and environmental assessment on the second phase of the road. And so and at the same time, we're watching the progress of Western Copper. And then on the north part of the North Canal, we have struck a deal with the First Nation government, and now we're going back to negotiate some of the baseline study work that has to be done. I think, our commitment going into 2024 is there's two areas. One, where Victoria Gold and Banyan is, where we're going to be able to put some funds into those areas through our normal maintenance budget. And at the same time, we're going to have that same opportunity to do it on the North Canal while we look at the bigger pockets of money. So I think we're in pretty good shape. But at the same time, look, the other thing that our difficulty is this. We have Newmont that's moving quickly now on the coffee project. We have the Banyan, Victoria Gold Hecla story happening in that area. Then you have Snowline as well, which is, really quite an exciting situation with fireweed. And fireweed, of course, has this extensive zinc opportunity plus, a really important tungsten project, which is important for the security of North America and allies. So what I've asked our teams to do is, through our energy mines team, our economic development team, we have to prioritize and we have to be very agile in how we deploy that money, because we've got a lot of things happening at once. So we're trying to keep up with the pace of the projects and the exploration. We're not in a position to be able to put $500 million out all of a sudden, but what we can do is continue to sort of work with the companies closely. So they do a great job. The private sector has infrastructure committees through the Yukon Chamber of Mines and another group called the Producers Group, and they all, they lobby government to do more, but they also commit to communicating with government so we know the needs of specific projects.
Fantastic. Awesome. Great answer. Oh, we do have one question. Hold on. I'll make my way to you so we can record it as well.
Sure.
Go ahead, Ray. I was wondering, with coming of more people on the workforce in the Yukon in the future, are there any houses available and that kind of thing? And is it payable for them, affordable?
Yeah.
Because that's a big problem also.
Yeah.
You have the facilities for the people who are coming there.
Housing's one of our key challenges because of our growth. So we've had this really significant growth over the last 5 years. Comparably to British Columbia, it's affordable. Is it still? Have we seen the expense for housing go up? We have. But what I've done is, in the role I'm in right now, there's 2 or 3 things in this role that I've continued to keep under my responsibility. So some of these bigger projects, like the grid connection, which is a multi-billion-dollar project, it's important that it's led out of the Premier's office, but housing as well. So I've kept that portfolio, and it's a mix of sort of 2 or 3 different strategies. Our first strategy is getting more opportunity for the private sector to build houses and subdivisions. We didn't have that in the Yukon. For decades, because it was in the north of Canada, the government was always sort of the key driver. So now what we're doing is bringing in sort of multiple opportunities. So the government's still working with subcontractors in the private sector, but now we're about to let out big tracts of land that will go out to the private sector so they can build the entire subdivision and the housing options. The other thing we have, which is really unique in the Yukon, and it's a great opportunity for the Yukon, is 11 of the 14 First Nation governments have this area within their treaty which states that if any individual, they don't have to be First Nations, any individual that lives on their lands, when they pay their income tax to the federal government, the majority of that income tax comes back to the First Nation. It's a very strategic thing they did. It's one of the only places in the country that it exists. So you can imagine how good that is for them, but also for the Yukon, because 85% of what people are paying for income tax, that you can imagine in Frankfurt, if 85% of the income tax that gets paid to the German government comes back to Frankfurt business holders, that's a good thing. So there's a lot of interest. So we're helping de-risk projects as well with First Nation governments. So there's a number of things. I mean, it's going to take us probably the next 24 to 36 months to catch up. And like everywhere in Canada, we're trying to get more people to build rental apartments because people want to build condos and strata title and recoup their money. And we're trying to de-risk more long-term rental. I think we're still going to see a migratory workforce for mining. I think because of the remoteness of some of our projects, we will see, infrastructure on site for camps that are there where people come in and out. But long-term, we want those really significant technical jobs to be Yukoners doing them. And we want people in our territory to be doing them. So I think the goal for government is if you have to be looking 5, 10, 15 years out, and you got to stay on it. And it's not, it's hard to make sure that you're staying in line with really, really robust growth, but that's our job. And the other thing I'll share with you is when it comes to healthcare, we're getting pressure right now because of our growth, but we did a long-term strategy for healthcare called Putting People First. We went out to our entire population and let them define what that looks like. That's in place, and now we're implementing it. When it comes to climate change, we did something called Our Clean Future. We went out and, again, made sure we heard from all Yukoners, First Nation governments, municipal governments. We're using that as our pathway. So we've done a lot of the strategy work, which for many find, it's kind of boring policy work, but it's important because it's your strategy and your pathway, which has key deliverables identified and, a blueprint to deal with growth.
Fantastic. Do we have any more questions? Oh, okay. Perfect. Because we have time for about 1.5 more. So
Okay. Try to keep it short.
Go ahead.
Great, thanks a lot. I just had a question about what you thought, very broad scheme, bird's eye view. I mean, there's all these large investments by the government for infrastructure and a lot of really exciting projects, but what do you see as far as more downstream kind of vertical integration as far as processing, cathode, anode facilities?
Yeah.
I get that, there's challenges labor and infrastructure-wise, specifically in the Yukon, but if you look at the Golden Triangle, there's a lot of regional synergy that could really make that a regional hub. And I think that recently Quebec and Ontario are very much in that kind of perspective. I mean, obviously they have all the car plants close by and whatever, but in a very long kind of view, do you see that as a possibility, or what's your thinking on that kind of more long view on how to actually develop and add more value to these resources as we develop them?
Sure. Power is going to be the cornerstone to be able to do it. Like, to be fair, we need that extra unlimited source to power. We need to be connected to the North American grid, and that's why we need to make that big investment. British Columbia as well, last week just announced another $1 billion project as well. So they're getting in the game. I think for us, like we just launched an innovation strategy for the next number of years 2 weeks ago, and we worked on it with some of the brightest minds in the country when it came to not just where we're going to go on the resource sector, but where we're going to go with the digital economy as well. I think the value add, which is usually, it's a lot of capex on the front end, depending on what you're trying to build out from an industrial standpoint. But I think it's going to really, for us, to be open, it's about getting the extraction right, because we know that that's part of it, and then where do we go if we have a grid connection? So, I mean, I look at where I see an opportunity, which is a bit of a segue. I'll just say this. Look, when we look at where we are positioned from a geopolitical standpoint and from a circumpolar world, we have to start thinking that way. We have to start thinking, what's to the east of us. Next week, I'm meeting with Nordic ambassadors from, all your neighbors here, the neighbors from here, to talk about how we can continue to have partnership and opportunities. We need more flights going that way. We need more traffic going that way. And we're going to have more Arctic sea traffic going that way, so that we see that as another big opportunity as well.
Fantastic. I think that's
great. Okay.
It's been wonderful. Fantastic.
Okay, Kai, thank you very much.
Thank you so
very much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. And I think we can give it up one last time. Thank you so much.
Yeah.